This video is brought to you by the Bast. For great streaming of music and more, the Bast offers the most high-end audio quality. The very first music computer? Visit the Bast website for more information. DAC stands for Digital to Analog Converter. These machines go between your computer and your amplifier, or between your smartphone and your headset. It's said that they simply transform the zeros and the ones into sound. But how can these sound different if it's just 0 and 1s? Well, it's not 0 and 1s. Welcome to the Bast Audiophile with your host, the Bast, an audiophile. I cover every week different fields of HiFi and audio systems. The goal is for you to appreciate more of your music. Basically, on this channel, we find unacceptable to listen to music on the phone with Bluetooth and AirPods. We want more love in our lives. Some of my videos are about product reviews. Some are simply exploring different HiFi knowledge. Today we learn about DACs. How do they work? Why do they sound different? You can see here in our audio chain chart that DACs are digital to analog converters. They stand between the digital source of music, whether it's your phone, your computer, your music streamer, like the Bast, sponsor of this video today, or the CD player. DACs stand between your source and your amplifier. It's the DAC that transforms the digital signal into an analog one. They're necessary because your amplifier sends an analog signal into the speakers to play music. Basically, DACs transform 0 and 1s into an analog wavelengths. So we think. But things are not that simple in the real world. The reality is that your computer has a DAC, your phone has a DAC, your CD player most likely has a DAC, so is your music streamer. So why audiophiles care about having another DAC, a separate one? Well, the reality is that not every DAC do its job well. DACs sound different. Why? Audiophiles have noticed by ear that a separate DAC makes music sound way better. More open, more detailed, more elegant and natural, more believable. Many audiophiles recognize that fact. Some don't though. There's plenty of arguments online. People argue whether it's worth it to invest in a separate DAC. DACs can start at $100 and can go up to 30,000 US dollars. It's a serious investment. And how to choose? There's so many DACs in the market these days, and many different technologies. We will look into that right now. First of all, we must realize that there's many things that will have a greater impact on your HiFi system than a new DAC. For instance, if you add a subwoofer, new speakers, a new amplifier, if you treat your room with a carpet, with a new sofa, or acoustic panels, all these things will have a greater impact than a new DAC. But having a separate DAC will change the sound. It will taint it. Many audiophiles care about that sound signature. It makes them enjoy music even more or less if it's a bad DAC. Some DACs are more warm, some are more detailed, some offer greater soundstage, some are more open and bright, some are like muffed. There's a lot of different sound, and these differences remain subtle though. So what caused these differences? Why DACs sound different? Because it's supposed to be a signal of 0 and 1s, so it should be easy to solve. To answer that question, we need to review some theory. First, we must realize that the digital signal is not 0 and 1s. In theory it is, on paper it is, but in practice it's an analog signal of two different voltages, low and high. We can think the low represents the 0 and the high represents the 1, but if the clock input is embedded in the signal, that changes everything, and it changes at every clock pulse. It becomes quickly complicated. So let's dig deep into that. We will now take the time to understand this reality because it helps us to understand why there's so many machines and why do they sound so different and what did they cost so different as well. First, it's important to know that the clock input is often mixed within the digital signal. So what does that mean? To understand all this, I'll refer to another YouTube channel, the channel of Beekhuyzen. I hope I pronounce it well. The images that you will see now comes from one of his videos. The link is down below in the description. It's one of the best YouTube channels for HiFi, so please subscribe to his channel if you haven't. To understand the digital signal, we must first look at this image. This is in theory how the digital signal should look like. And you can see that the clock input is within the digital signal. As you can see in the graphic, the signal goes from low to high, then from high to low, and back and forth at every clock beat. If the signal changes between two clock beats, then it's considered a 1. If there's no change between two clock beats, it's considered a 0. So the digital signal is not 0 and 1s, but it's an analog signal that changes from low to high and from high to low voltages. The whole thing is based on the clock beat. And that notion is important, because the variation of voltages has to be perfect on the clock beat every single time. But in reality, it's not. The reality is that the signal looks more like this. It takes some time for the voltage to go up and down, so the signal isn't squared, but mostly smooth since it's a variation of current. The digital signal is in fact an analog one, like other signals in your sound systems. And it varies from low to high voltages on the clock beat. So it's as delicate as all the other signals in your sound system. It must be treated with delicate care. You want to avoid electrostatic and electromagnetic influences, as well as vibrations, exactly like an analog signal, because it's an analog signal. Up to here, there shouldn't be any mistake in the interpretation. The zeros and the ones are still easily recognizable. The patterns are here stable and perfect. But it cannot be that easy. When the clock makes its readings 2 times per beat, it should in theory be able to recognize what's considered a 0 and what is considered a 1. Like here, no mistake. But the reality is that the digital signal is an analog one. And like an analog one, the digital signal is constantly affected by different sources. Like we said, vibrations, electrostatic, and electromagnetic interference, and radio frequencies can modify slightly the signal. Also, the way the DAC is wired and the way its circuits are conceived can all affect the signal. Therefore, how the DAC will read the zeros and the ones. Most likely there will be mistakes, because in fact, the reality looks more like this. You can see here how all the variations and interferences and the circuits have shaped the digital signal. They all make it irregular. Here you see that when you apply the clock's reading, some errors can occur. It becomes difficult to be certain of an interpretation. Here the 1 in red is a misinterpretation, it's an error, due not to the DAC or its clock, but to the frequency interference in that case. Or it could be due to how the DAC circuits are conceived, or it could be a vibration, who knows. When we compare the reality of physics to the theory, we can see that errors can happen. Zeros and ones can be misread, and it changes what we hear from the DAC. Vibrations, electrostatic, electromagnetic, and radio frequencies are real and everywhere, and they all affect the sound of your HiFi system. It can also be the conception of the DAC, its digital circuits, or the clock, or the analog output stage. They all can influence the sound of the DAC as well. Finally, even when we stream, there can be interferences in the transmission. This is why sometimes some audiophiles prefer the sound of a CD player rather than the one of a streamer. That's the reason why it's important to have a good streamer. It preserves the quality of the signal. Like our sponsors of today's video, the Bast. Now we can understand why the different technologies inside the DACs will change the sound. Every DAC technology interprets differently the digital signal. In general, we consider that there's 3 types of DAC technologies. You have the chip-based DACs, called Delta Sigma, FPGA for Field Programmable Gate Array, and thirdly, R2R DACs that many audiophiles really like. The most common technology is the chip-based one, because it's the easiest one to develop and produce. Basically, a chip provides programmers with a platform to develop on. Popular chips are mostly ESS and AKM, but there are others like Burr Brown that I really like. Generally, the ESS chips provide a clear, detailed, and analytic sound, close to harshness at times. And the AKM are more transparent and offer more natural sound. But these are just guidelines. Their interpretation on the circuit board can make a huge difference. The circuit boards, the clock, and the wiring will affect the sound. So DACs, even with the same chips, can sound different. It's to be known that most chips are not meant for audio use only. They can serve many purposes, so that can be a problem because they're not specialized for audio. That brings us to the second type of DACs, the FPGAs. FPGA is like a programmable chip. You can customize them to be more adapted for audio's purposes. It's like a platform where the hardware is more flexible. It's customizable electronics. So the sound of FPGA can vary greatly from a DAC to another one. FPGA provide a more flexible, not necessarily a guarantee of great sound. It really depends on how it's programmed. So although it offers great potential for developers, the downside is it requires more resources and more time to program than a Delta Sigma solution. Finally, there's R2R DACs. R2R are resistor-based DACs built-in ladder. So they work a little bit like a band equalizer, like this one. You can see that the 0 and 1s are associated to different bands in order to determine a specific frequency at a specific voltage. Here you see a resistor network of 4 bands. Most R2R DACs have many more bands than 4. R2R is an old technology, but it might be the favorite one of audiophiles, since the channels are more linear. Having that said, it can come with disadvantages, specifically when high dynamics are involved. If you want more detailed explanation on R2R DACs, I'll put a link down below in the description. So that concludes our review of DAC Technologies. If you want to purchase one, I can only emphasize the importance of listening to it before to purchase. YouTubers can direct you directly to great models, but don't buy one without listening to it. There are bad DACs in the market. Some DACs are better than others. We've seen today that each DAC sounds different because the way they deal different with current. It varies from one to another. The technology changes the sound. First, we've seen that electronics in the input channel or the output channel can change the sound signature. Also, the sound can be different because the quality of the transmission, whether it's vibration, electrostatic, electromagnetic, or radio frequencies. Finally, the quality of the clock is of great impact and is key. Many audiophiles will purchase master clocks for that reason. They will link all their digital equipment to one master clock. These are all the reasons why no DAC sounds the same. We hope that today's video was instructive, and if you like what you heard, please subscribe. More videos like this one are coming. You might as well consider joining our Patreon to be part of the making of these videos. See the link down below in the description. Finally, if you're a manufacturer and you'd like us to review one of your products, you're kindly invited to write us an email, as provided in the About section of this YouTube channel. We look forward to seeing you in other videos. Thank you so much for watching until the end. It was pretty long, but we had fun making it. Thank you very much for your attention and see you soon.